Leaders, what I'm about to tell you is so imperative to understand, especially if you are the head of the household and leading your family through the greatest transfer of wealth that we've ever seen or will ever see again for hundreds of years. So these are two things I teach on almost every single one of my breakthrough sessions, and I'm going to pass on that wisdom to you. So the first thing is there are two phases of wealth. Phase one is wealth creation, what I call wealth creation. Phase two is wealth preservation. There are two different games being played here. Something to write down. Concentration builds wealth. So think of like a laser. You want to laser your focus and concentrate in the wealth creation phase. That means you are not over diversified. Okay, please hear me, because this is so crucial. I promise you this will completely change your family's life forever. You don't want to be too diversified in phase one. Now let me back up and say phase one I consider, and this differs person to person, but generally I consider phase one, wealth creation, to be anywhere from $0 to $5 million. And then phase two, which is wealth preservation, is 5 million and above. So most people listening to this are likely in phase one or just teetering into phase two. That's generally what my audience is. Now, in phase one, again, you want to concentrate your wealth. Too many people are over diversified in phase one. The goal in phase one is to fill your buckets. So let's say you have no more than 5 buckets. You want to fill those buckets so they're overflowing. So you are concentrating your wealth. And then in phase two, wealth preservation, that is when you diversify. So concentration builds wealth, diversification preserves wealth. Write that down. Concentration builds wealth, diversification preserves wealth. But you're not overly diversifying in phase one. Because again, the goal, I keep repeating myself so it gets ingrained in your subconscious mind, the goal in phase one is to hyper concentrate into a few assets that you know have big upside potential. So that's why being a researched investor is so important, because I may invest in things that you may not believe in or value or have a sense of intelligence in. So what I invest in may be different than what you invest in. Now, so knowing what phase you're in, to sum all this up, is extraordinarily important. Are you in phase one from 0 to 5 million, or are you in phase two, 5 million and above? Because again, it is a different game you are playing. Very important to understand. Now, the second part I promised you, and I hope you're going along, I know I'm going quick here, is you want to play, so I have a 3-step process that I teach in my breakthrough sessions. You want to play offense, you want to play defense, and then you want to have a foundational pillar. Let me explain what those means. So offense is more of a risk-on asset class. Cryptocurrency, I have my XRP shirt on. Cryptocurrency is definitely a risk-on asset class, meaning you're taking more risk, but also there's more reward with more risk. So you want to have, ideally, if you're in phase one, you want to have at least one bucket in the offensive position. Because, and also that depends on how old you are, your risk tolerance, etc. Those are things I can only know meeting you face to face. But you want to have at least one offensive bucket. So my main offensive bucket, I have 2, are cryptocurrency, and then I also have Tesla stock. So I'm still under 5 million. We're not over the 5 million yet. We're getting close. I'm really excited. We're getting close, but we're not in there yet. So I'm still concentrated. Now you also want to have a defensive position, a bucket in your defensive position. So what does that mean? That means an asset that is risk less. So meaning an asset that carries less risk, but still gradual returns over time. So I always ask people, what do you think one of those asset classes is? And a lot of people will say precious metals. And I'll say, yes, gold, silver, copper. These are God's money. These are assets that have stood the test of time, that have been around for thousands and thousands of years. And of course, there's more defensive positions. Like I would consider Bitcoin a defensive position. Life insurance a defensive position. Real estate a defensive position. Everybody needs a home to live in. So the point I want to make is you want to not choose too many buckets, but you want to have at least one offensive bucket, at least one defensive bucket. And then the final piece is the foundations. foundations to me is physical precious metals, like physical gold and silver, and then having an emergency fund in cash. So this is the 3-step system I teach, and the emergency fund is 3 to 6 times your monthly expenses. So in other words, if your monthly expenses are, say, $5,000 per month, that means having 3 months in cash of $15,000 is a great idea, or $30,000 in cash. So consider that your emergency fund in case the electrical grid goes down, something gnarly happens in our world. Having cash on hand is always a good idea. Additionally, having precious metals, because gold, silver, these are continuously going up in price every single year, and having them in your physical person is a superpower. So that's the 3-step system I teach. You got to play offense, you got to play defense, and that way you got to be diversified, but not too diversified in phase 1. And then you got to have your foundational pillar, precious metals, cash, things in the reserve in case you need them and should you want to sell them eventually. Now, my leaders, I'm going to pass you off to my man, Vandel Aljara. He is actually the brother of my business partner and dear friend, Versan Aljara. And he's going to walk you through another 2 minutes of why it's so crucial to get positioned now in this great wealth reset before it is too late. If you found this video valuable, please pass it on to someone who needs to hear this, maybe someone who's in phase 1 of their wealth creation game. And if you want to work with me one-on-one, where I can hold your hand, I can look you eye to eye, I can help you understand your values and refine your money machine so it's in alignment with your goals as an investor and the head of the household, it would be my honor. And your results are guaranteed, your confidence and clear strategy is guaranteed, or you get all your money back. To get that, you can just comment freedom. I love you guys so much.
So firstly, you need to understand that monetary resets are not theoretical. If you look at history, you'll see that they have happened countless times in the past. So that's why it's extremely critical to really understand ahead of time which assets have historically carried value through these transitions and which ones will likely hold their value and even appreciate in value with a high degree of certainty as the system shifts and as we finally enter a new updated financial system. Because the truth is, we are currently living through a reset. It just hasn't fully manifested yet, and you want to be positioned before it fully happens. Now, the reality is most people won't recognize a major reset or a wealth transfer while it's actually happening. They'll only see it clearly in hindsight, after the opportunity has already passed and after it's already occurred. And that's simply because people and the masses are conditioned to really expect a single defining moment, some dramatic headline, or a crisis announcement, or something like that. But that's rarely how these systemic changes actually unfold in the real world, okay? The reality is the biggest wealth transfers and monetary shifts tend to develop gradually, slowly, over the years, before we actually get to that defining moment. And these shifts are largely driven by policy decisions, changing incentives, and some other topics that I can't talk about in this video at the moment. But by the time it becomes obvious to the public, the repricing, okay, of the money, assets, repricing of the value has already occurred by then. And smart money, or the people that actually see what's coming, they are already positioned before these changes take place. So what this means more than anything for regular investors is that investing during a transition like this or during a monetary reset is no longer just about chasing returns. It becomes more about preservation and survival. So the core principle here is pretty simple. You basically want to own assets that will either appreciate in value or at the very least carry their value forward as the system transitions from the old framework to the new one. And that's it in simple terms.